Welcome to the Talent Equation Podcast. If you are passionate about helping young people to unleash their potential and want to find ways to do that better, then you've come to the right place. The Talent Equation Podcast seeks to answer the important questions facing parents, coaches, and talent developers as they try to help young people become the best they can be. This is a series of unscripted, unpolished conversations between people at the razor's edge of the talent community who are prepared to share their knowledge, experiences, and challenges in an effort to help others get better faster. Listen, reflect, and don't forget to join the discussion at thetalentequation.co.uk. Enjoy the show.
Well, I'm looking forward to this morning's conversation because it's likely to be relentlessly optimistic, because I'm joined by Nick Hurd from Relentless Optimism. Nick, welcome to the Talent Equation.
Morning. Very much looking forward to this. Somewhat nervous, but I'm sure I'll overcome that in a minute.
There's no need to be nervous, as you know. With the Talent Equation, we just literally have a conversation, and we see where the conversation takes us, and just allow a couple of, it's essentially a couple of practitioners to chew in the fat about the things that we see and feel. I suppose the starting point is you join us from sunny Spain. I'm very jealous. But the starting point, I suppose, is just to sort of give us a bit of the backstory around you as, kind of an educator, coach, et cetera, and also the story behind Relentless Optimism, I suppose.
Yeah, okay. But where's probably best place to start is I was very fortunate to have fantastic PE teachers at school, and they from an early age got me into coaching. I was coaching at 16. Had learned that stacking shelves in the supermarket at £2 an hour or something ridiculous wasn't as much fun as lifeguarding, and then teaching swimming, which then very quickly moved on to coaching trampolining, and that really sort of cemented my desire to become a teacher. So I went to St Mary's University, or as the university is now in Twickenham, had 3 amazing years there doing a sports science degree. Actually should have gone the year before. Had spent far too much time in sixth form playing rugby and just being sport billy, earning some money and doing nonsense. And in the wise words of one of my teachers, she said, you may have got your way through GCSEs by talking a lot, but you will struggle at A-level. And despite an unconditional offer, she was right, because the condition of going to university was 2 A-levels, and I'd only managed to get 1. Yeah. So I had that learning to fail very quickly, sort of galvanised in a year of doing a sports studies A-level. I did upper and lower sixth in a year just to get what I needed to get to university. So getting there really meant a lot. Thoroughly enjoyed university all the way through. Then I think I was the last year of grant. That shows my age. And was working and still swimming, teaching, coaching, and all of those things through uni. Came out, toyed around with staying in coaching. The job I had worked with elite tennis youngsters, which was fantastic. I was working with a guy called Tim Exeter, who was the fitness director of fitness sport, whatever the title is or was then, at Northampton, and we were training what would be elite tennis players. Mixed that up with a bit of personal training, looking forward to the one client that comes in and says, "Oh, by the way, I work for a big football team. Would you like to come join us?" And that never happened. And then thought, well, actually, the passion's always been young people and teaching. Let's go back and do a PGC and see where that gets us. So I did that at St Mary's, finished that, had a great time on the PGC course, which if anyone's embarking on it, I'd highly recommend. But it's a year of just literally study, teach, sleep, and you get through the other end, and then you're let loose with just this raw and energetic talent, which you know from your work with the young people you work with. It's just fantastic.
So And so having done your PGCE and sort of, I guess, embarked then on an education career, that then has led you around a number of different paths through your career. And I think there might be some, it'd be interesting just to see how all of that then arrived with you doing what you do today, and also how Relentless Optimism came about.
Well, yeah, 100%. I was lucky enough to work in a sports college. Now, I say back in the day, 15 years ago, the sports colleges network was really big, and I worked in a sports college in South London that the new head had taken over. It was she'd been there 18 months by the time I joined, and in the PE department there were about 14 PE teachers, which is unheard of in school. But she was a PE teacher herself and recognised the importance of PE on helping shape and mould the character of young people. So we had limitless resources and limitless time. And, we were working with some of the most disadvantaged and challenging young people, the community served. It was a great learning experience, because having thought I could teach, I went there and realised that, oh my God, I can't. And then had that moment of, what am I going to do? I've now got this job where it's really difficult, highly stressful. And it started to unlock that, the value of relationships. And, as coaches or teachers working with young people, you're often the most consistent aspect of that young person's life. So I think the Relentless Optimism seed started there. So as a PE teacher and a coach, you're in and out of the changing room, and so you're in and out helping. It's almost like Mark Bennett's work when he talks about training recruits. You're starting with children that have barely got themselves dressed, that end up coming, huge distances across London to secondary school. They then have to get changed for PE and get changed back again, and so you're actually helping them regulate their own personal administration, and so you're always eyes open. And I had a young lad whose name I cannot remember, but he was reluctant to change. So we're over in you got 40 boys changing in a changing room, and most of them from minority ethnic backgrounds. And there's this one white lad, Jason, his name was, standing in the corner not changing, and we were like, let's have a conversation around it. And he took his vest off and showed me a body covered in about 120 cigarette burns. And I was like, oh my God, those things you only talk about teacher training. And that set a series of events for him that would have, no doubt been very traumatic, but would have led him to a better place. And he said, my mum loves me, this is how she shows me. And it kind of like breaks your heart, and then you realise the importance that you have as an educator on changing young people's lives. And I vowed that I was going to make a difference. I then finished a master's quite quickly, moved into school leadership because I wanted to have more influence on how schools worked, and moved into an assistant head post where I was responsible for learning and teaching, which was fantastic, because all of the things that you talk about with practitioners on the podcast 100% relate to what teachers do. And I think there's maybe we can explore that teacher coach language, because I think they're synonymous. And my destination was going to be a head teacher. I then moved to an inner city school in Lambeth, which was fantastic, and landed with a team that very quickly became clear that we shared the same values. And I think I probably went down like a lead balloon when I arrived at school, because I said teachers are important, but children are more important. I don't think the colleagues that I was joining were ready to hear that. And then those that did very quickly aligned, and we started to change the culture in the school, where we were really putting young people first. And that's where, just talking like we are with a couple of colleagues, we said, look, what are we doing? Why are we, why don't we get a Twitter handle? Let's build a website. And we taught ourselves to do a website. And we said, well, look, the two things that I want out of my team is to be relentlessly optimistic, for the young people that you serve, because, all people. So I think when you work with people, and young people certainly, you're often disappointed. It's a bit like my golf, to be honest. You have a cracking round, and then you come back and then play a terrible round, and you think, why have I bothered? And then the last shot always makes you think, I can do this, I'll come back again. And working with children can be like that, because it's very rarely consistent. And the other thing that we just said that was important to us is to ask how we can do it better for the young people that we serve. And those two things led to this notion of being relentlessly optimistic. And there's a on the Twitter feed and on the website there was a video by Levi's, the Running Through Walls video. I don't know if you remember it. And that was that's what we need to do for our young people. We need to be prepared to run through walls for them in ways that other adults aren't, and then help them through, because sometimes they need a little more help than others. Help them through to be the best versions that they can be. Can you still hear me? The coffee machine's going in the background.
Yeah. No, it's not a problem at all. I'll have a cappuccino, by the way.
Coffee out here, so it's better than that.
It is, isn't it? Always. I always think that whenever I go out there, I go, oh my God, it's such amazing coffee.
On its way.
I mean, look, I said at the start that you're actually on holiday, and you've chosen to spend some of your holiday time talking to me on a podcast. So hey, look, I'm happy to have the conversation whichever way it comes, coffee machines in the background or not.
Just to make it authentic.
Exactly. There we go. So I've got some thoughts really around this idea, really. I mean, I want to start really, I suppose, with what you just talked about, running through walls. I think this is a really important area that is often, in my opinion anyway, really overlooked, which is, I think, coaches in particular, you can tell me if this applies to the teaching profession as well. But certainly in the coaching community, I think we tend to be really quite focused on the stuff we do on the pitch or in the court or wherever it is we happen to operate, on the track or wherever. And that's our focus point. And we talk about practices and design and sessions and making everything work like that. And we almost feel like the stuff beyond that, well, that's not really for us to deal with. That's for others. And I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like that's where we're missing the trick, because it's all the other stuff. So the talent equation was born from the concept of talent or ability, or people's human development is a equation in my mind between the internal factors that people bring. So that's their kind of psychological internal factors, mental, emotional, physical, all those sorts of things. Those are their abilities. Combined with, so it's their physical capabilities combined with the internal capabilities, those mental, emotional things. And that is massively influenced by external factors. So social factors, friends, peer groups, club environment, parents, etc., etc. All of that is a massive influencer. And we, in my opinion, as leaders or people who support young people's development, need to take that into consideration, and we play quite an important role in making all of that support that individual through development. And you describe it as running through walls, because often I think it feels like running through walls, and therefore it goes in the too hard box. So we then focus back on what we can control, which is our environment. So we create our environment. But actually there is an ecological framework to this, which is there are layers outside of the young person. So starting with that young person, there are layers which we play a role in influencing, or at the very least influencing the young person to be able to navigate more effectively with all the other things going on in their lives. So I feel like that's kind of where you've centered on with Relentless Optimism. Would that be a fair summation of what you're looking to try and achieve?
Yeah, definitely. I think young people need adults that notice. Okay, and when you work with as a teacher, you have a huge sphere of influence, like a coach, on young people. I'm a teacher because of great teachers, and I would imagine that the majority of the coaches that are working, and teachers working with young people, are there because they are inspired and have been inspired by great teachers. it's absolutely more than just the technical side of coaching. It's about feel, and it's about creating, for me, creating environments, whether it be in the classroom for young people or in the work I do outside with a charity, or the work I'm now doing with apprenticeships across London. It's about creating a feel and a sense of notice that they experience, because when you're valued, you know yourself, people, you do more. I know it's my coffee arriving, gracias. You do more, you commit more, you are more receptive to other people's ideas. And I think often it can 100% agree with your narrative around the war against drills. They're not fun experiences. And that how something feels is the biggest determinant for me on the likelihood of success or changing behaviour. Does that make sense?
Completely. And I've always been that's always been a huge driver. I think that there's something you said actually several times in your kind of introductory piece that I think is really indicative of this, and I'd be interested to just get you to expand on this a little bit, which is you mentioned about the young people we serve. This was a phrase you used time and again, and that for me says a lot about the approach and the focal point, which is there to serve these individuals on their journey through life. And I'm very influenced by the concept of servant leadership. So just expand on that for me. So
as adults, if we don't like our life, we can change it. So if I didn't want to be a teacher, I could change it. I could have stuck out being a coach or personal trainer or whatever else. As a child, when you're entrusted to another adult, whether it be in coaching or a coaching context or a classroom, you as adults serve those young people because they can't change their lives. So they don't have necessarily the agency or the resource to change it. So we absolutely 100% serve those young people. And it's funny, it's something that's opened doors for me, but also as constrained where my career has gone. And I'll give an example. So I thought I was destined for headship and was going to then influence a great number of young people, a great number of colleagues, and we were going to make magic happen. That didn't work out for me, largely because I think headship it's like football management. You're either instantly appointable or you're not. And also, I refuse to say that results are more important than people. So when talking to colleagues or governing bodies or whoever it was around young people, my drive has always been better people. If you create, and it's funny because a lot of the things that I read have shaped my thinking, but have also given me language for what I felt and what I thought. So Mark Bennett's rule of three absolutely resonated, and I now think he's official stalker, is that because it gave a language to what I was trying to do when I was teaching or coaching outside of the classroom. And if you can create better people, you create better outcomes. Now, for a governing body to appoint somebody on that basis is probably a risk, because what a governing body wants to hear is, we want to improve results. But you can't get results unless you get the behaviours right, and creating better people or better behaviours will lead to those outcomes. So, and to do that, we are servant leaders. We serve a community of young people that don't have yet agency to change their own destinations or their own lives. So we need to be very mindful and respectful of that. That I say power, that position that we hold.
So in that context, then environment becomes essential, because if the environment is full of compliance, in the sense that you are told what to do, you're told when to do it, you're told how to do it, and woe betide you if you kind of step out of line, because there are serious consequences. If that's the environment, then surprise, surprise, when some individuals may well progress through that, fairly comfortably. But it will definitely have some significant knock-on effects in the sense that it negates so many other aspects of how young people need to be able to operate in the world. Because, in my mind, whether we talk about life or we talk about sport, it's about decisions. It's a constant process of decision making. You have choices to make in any given moment about the way you're going to act, the way you're going to react, the way you're going to interact with another, the method you're going to use, whether it's going to be aggression, or it's going to be negotiation, or it's going to be dialogue, or whatever it might be. There are lots of choices that people have all the time, every single day, every single moment, every day. They have a lot of decisions to make. Now, if you haven't got an environment where you can experience choice, you can experience decisions, and you have tools that help you, or you have the opportunity to develop tools, if you like, experientially, with some guidance around making choices moment to moment and understanding what the consequences of those choices are, dealing with those consequences, reacting to those consequences, and then moving beyond those. If you don't have an environment that fosters that, explores that, is safe to fail, creates those different scenarios, then how do you expect young people then, when faced with those challenges and there isn't a rule book telling them do this or do that, how do you expect them to be able to navigate that space? So they live in a world of, in my opinion, I feel anyway, young people, and one of the reasons I think they find it so difficult to navigate in the world at the moment, they live in a world between ruthless authoritarianism and laissez-faire, do whatever you want. And it must be so hard to find your way through that, because the consequences on either end are so extreme.
Yeah, 100%. And it's funny. We had a session, like a leadership session with Keith Antoine. Mm-hmm. He came into school to do some work with the leadership team, and or my then school leadership team. And he said something that led me to sort of try and model it. I called it the think model. He started with the phrase, "People always do the right thing for themselves as they see it at that moment in time." Mm-hmm. Now, when you're operating in what you describe an authoritarianism at one end and laissez-faire at the other, it's very hard to know what are good choices in that situation. And so my role, I was behaviour and data and all of those things. So I would be on call and be called to a situation in a classroom where a child has made a bad choice. Now, we're still very mindful that even a 15-year-old, 16-year-old strapping hunk of a young man is still a child and still needs to be given choices. And what I noticed was you get like a deficit situation where the teacher is always right, even if they're not right, and the teacher is always right, and the child has to lose. So we'd be called out to these, and it's quite common in schools to have a senior team on call, and you go and firefight in essence. And you'd be called out to these walls of attrition. She said, I did this, I didn't do that, he did this, and whatever else. And it was just vacuous. And what we then talked about was, I'd use two stock phrases really. If I was watching what was going on through the window, would I be proud, yes or no? And children have an ingrained moral compass. And the pride thing's fascinating because over 7 years of using it, I never had a child say yes when they knew that they hadn't been. So my next question was, do you know what you need to do, what it needs to look like when you go back into the class? Can you show me and can you make me proud? Yes. And invariably, I was very rarely called back to deal with the same child in the same setting. So we've given a framework, children can navigate and operate really successfully in it when it's so broad. And then this is a challenge that you have with working with young people in schools or in different coaching contexts. If everyone does it and sticks to the framework, whilst there's security and rigidity around it, children can operate and function really highly. When they go to Mr. Armstrong's class and he doesn't expect those things, or Mr. Armstrong's coaching session, he doesn't expect those things, it's destabilising for them because they're like, well, why isn't he picking me up on this? Because if I'm in with Mr. Hurd, I know that he's going to give me the look and say, can you do it better? Yes or no? Yes, right, show me. Do you see what I mean? So it's really, really hard, and that's why they need adults that A, notice, and B, that are prepared to run through walls when necessary, create environments that are safe, stimulating, challenging, where you can fail openly and unpick it and understand why, because the bandwidth, as you said, is so huge, and there's so much danger now involved for young people as well. That the choices aren't as probably we had when we were growing up, it was a lot more structure. If you rode your bike on the pavement, you got a clip round the ear from the copper. Now it's a different world, so that's why I'm very passionate that we serve young people in those environments. Does that make sense?
Well, 100%. I mean, and you make a really important point around, you hear a lot, don't you, on social media and stuff about, what they term, the snowflakes, this generation that is, kind of incapable of coping with any, kind of challenge or difficulty or anything like that. And it's almost as if an older generation is sneering at a younger generation for, you have it all. You've never been so prosperous. You've never had so much opportunity and all these sorts of things, and yet you can't cope and you can't manage and all these sorts of things. And what the hell's wrong with you? Well, I don't know if that older generation fully realised that everything that's happening with this sort of so-called younger generation is a product of a system or a culture that has been created by adults. And I'm not necessarily going to malign them saying that they were doing it wrong. Like you say, they were probably trying to do the best thing that they thought they could do in the moment. But I think there was an awful lot of people, or an awful lot of people have had a look at the systems that have been created around particularly education, but also, other aspects of, human development that have failed to notice your point of notice, failed to notice the human aspect. And this pervasive scenario, or not scenario, but pervasive, almost like cultural driver that we've had, that the idea is that human development is something that is akin to mechanization, whereby it's input output. I put input in and I get an output out, and that's what we're looking for. And the results point you started, come back to the point, I refuse to say that results are more important than people. I've had several conversations recently with individuals who have been, what's the word I'm looking for, who have had a similar experience to you, where they have their unwillingness to compromise from that perspective of people are more important than results has basically come at great personal cost to them. And there is if this podcast is becoming about anything, I mean, it's one of the things it's becoming about is the fact that young people deserve a lot better. And there are people out there who see them as a commodity, only see what they can produce as valuable, and not themselves as beings as valuable. And the world has moved in this situation. So I feel now that the so-called snowflake, if you like, is actually just a human being who finds it very, very difficult to pick up on the cultural cues and therefore know how to act in a given moment. And also, it's also an individual who has never had that focus placed upon them, that choices are important and learning about and making decisions is important. I don't feel like they've ever been given that opportunity to explore the pros and cons of each of those things, and therefore it's no surprise that they literally just, I mean, you talk about fall to pieces, they don't fall to pieces, but I can imagine that the stress of that is really quite high.
It's interesting, the snowflake thing, because I guess my sort of unrelenting passion is centred around the disadvantaged young people in London, and that's obviously where I'm based. And the snowflake generation, certainly not in 20 years of education, is something that I've seen in the schools I've worked in. I mean, the reality for children that are disadvantaged is, the first is you don't need to tell them they're disadvantaged; they know straight away. They see it the moment they get on the bus, when they see the other children going off in their expensive blazers and boaters and everything else to their fee-paying schools. And that's not a knock at fee-paying schools at all. A child coming from an estate in London will see hundreds of kids travelling across, and straight away they know that they're not the same. Second is that the reality isn't I wouldn't be as crass to say it's a parenting thing, because parents are on the a lot of parents are on the breadline and working 2 jobs, 3 jobs. Dad works nights, mum 2 jobs in a day, and so the reality for these children is that they are on their own, not out of bad parenting, out of good parenting and trying to survive. The exposure then to people that would manipulate them for their own ends. So sadly, a lot of our work was with young people on the edge or near gang-related activity and criminal activity. So a child, a 14-year-old, 15-year-old boy works out very quickly that he can take a £5 into Poundland, spend it, and come out with loads of stuff that he can sell on his way to school and double, treble his money. So they're gritty and resilient, and they absolutely need people that notice that, recognise it, and then can channel it. I think one of the defining things for me 2 years ago was when we've got exams, GCSE exams, and I've got a young lady that we've taken out. She came to us via the Pru, so there's a lot of chat at the minute about the missing children, where children are off-rolled and disappear. We were very clear on that anybody that started with us finished with us, or if they didn't finish with us, we would be involved in their next educational placement, whatever else. And this young lady didn't turn up for her English exam, so I sent one of the team, Relentless Optimism team, round to go to her house and find her, because she was an incredibly bright young lady. And he was gone ages, and I was like, well, get him on the phone. What on earth are you doing? The exam's about to start. He said, I can't talk. So I gave the phone to one of the other Relentless Optimism guys. He said he can't talk. He's resuscitating a mum who had tried to kill herself the morning of this girl's English Lit final paper, which was critical for her to go on. That's the reality when you work with disadvantaged communities and when you serve young people. You'll do whatever it takes for those young people, because they can't change. Now, for her not to have gained her GCSE, okay, might have been a setback for a year, but the fact that she got it and she did incredibly well was one of the most humbling and defining moments of the work that I've done in schools. And the fact that one of the team felt it that much as I did. Nobody really wants to be going round to an estate to resuscitate somebody's mum that's had an overdose or whatever else, in a suit on a June morning. But that's what you need. That's what people do for young people, and that's not just what we do. That goes on up and down the country, where the reality of working with young people at I say the cutting edge, it's not the cutting edge, is it? On the breadline in marginal communities, is that you need to do whatever it takes to help them up. And then once you've kind of leveled the playing field, there's an opportunity for them to excel and to fly. So the snowflake thing was, it's not something that I'm overly familiar with, although I'm very mindful of the pressures that the exam system, the outcome system puts on both teachers and young people. I've just had a 16-year-old get his GCSE results, which were great. And all I said to him was, just work hard. I said, I don't care not what you get, just work hard. And that's where we need to shift to being people-centred, I believe, and make it about work and hard work and effort, as opposed to, I'm not saying that you quantify it, well done, you got a 7 in your effort grade. It's just, let's build those habits and those behaviours around, okay, I've got it wrong, right, what questions are you going to ask now to understand that better? Or what questions are you going to ask so that you come away from that knowing what it is that you need to do to be better at it the next time?
Which is a very different approach, isn't it, than just sort of saying, get the right answer come what may.
It's so I was out running as often as I do, and I feel like I spend as much time with you as I do my wife, in and out of work and podcast listening and whatever else. And when you had the Magic Academy boys on, that all of that work is based on questions.
Yeah.
Asking right questions. Education is about questions. Coaching is about questions. Why did that not work as well as you thought it did? What was your intention? How can we do that better? What would be different if this happened? And if you can get that right, so we go from asking then to telling, you can start to influence behaviour. Because if you tell me, I'm really not, I was told to stop blagging it and get on and do some work, and it didn't change my behaviour. It was only the act of failing and then asking questions about, well, why did I convince myself that I could talk my way through A-level, that you learn, that the learning takes place.
Yeah.
And I often telling, right, we're going to, and so my boys all play rugby. The eldest one and the middle one are both in a player development academy, elite academy, and whatever else. And sadly, the eldest has been gifted with my genes, so he's not 6'4" tall and 6 foot wide and 18 stone and able to run 100 meters in 7 seconds. So who knows where it goes? And I've said to him, just work hard. And I made a conscious choice not to get involved with coaching with them on a Sunday morning because I wanted to go down as dad. And what I didn't want to be then is this mega PE nose that knows everything about everything and, overly involved. So I thought, well, I can't do it for all three of you because I can't be in three places at once, which is often the case on a Sunday morning anyway. But I just then took let's just have a look and watch what goes on. And the volunteer coaches, they're all, do a fantastic job, but they are telling coaches as opposed to questioning coaches. And so I've been dropping in, you need to listen to this podcast. Have a listen to this. This might help. Have you thought about your language? And the clarity of the language is absolutely key. For things like, I don't know, if you take a breakdown in rugby, is it a ruck? If it's a ruck, what are you going to do with it? So you hear drive over, clear out, move him out the way, kill him, drive through it, smash it. But what one of those 5 words do you mean that's going to have meaning for the young person that you're talking to? Because if you say different words, they're different things. They haven't got the vocabulary or the knowledge to know that those 5 things mean the same in an outcome that you want. So it is that the questioning around why has that happened? What would you do differently? And it's the same in a classroom with a teacher asks us a question, child responds, and then we move on. Well, actually, if we're listening and really thinking about it, why aren't we asking another question? What's the question you want to ask based on that? Why did that happen? Why did you intended that? This is what's happened. Why has that happened? And it changes 100% the way that you interact and the value you get out of those interactions with young people, because all of a sudden you're asking them, and they're empowered. So whether it be about why was it a good idea to stick 2 fingers up at the copper that's just driven past and drop a can of Coke on the floor and then run? Why would that be a good idea? Because then it sets on a series of events. And once you can have those conversations, you can start to unpick and modify behaviour. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And
on a soapbox, and I can't get off. Sorry.
No. It's if anything, this podcast is about. It's about people being on their soapbox. In fact, the podcast doesn't work if people don't get on their soapbox. On that subject of questioning, it's interesting. Or just flicking back actually quickly to the snowflake thing. I think you're probably right in the sense that I think the whole snowflake thing is a bit of a media creation, and probably only is reflected by essentially kind of middle class people who have created this scenario of expectation. One of the things I find very interesting is how adult expectation. So when you talk about the results culture, so it manifests itself in lots of ways, but in a parenting context, expectation, I think, is one of the key issues. So in your context, like you say, with the kids that you're working with in that kind of disadvantaged community, those kids are, like you say, their parents are trying to survive, they're trying to survive. They have to take a lot of personal responsibility really quite quickly because they become adults really far too soon, don't they? They don't have the benefits of childhood or some of the benefits of other kids' childhoods because they're having to perform parenting duties, either caregivers of other kids or all that stuff. So I get that. And I do agree with you in terms of, but the thing is, without the right kind of support, that can work two ways, can't it? Because if you're supported by somebody, an adult who notices, I love that phrase. If you're supported by an adult who notices and you can be given the right kind of guidance, then the resilience element that comes with that can be really powerful and can set you on the right path. However, if you don't have that guidance and you make a series of seemingly inconsequential mistakes but then become huge, then it can crumble you. It can absolutely destroy you and can set you on a really, really negative path. And so the guidance piece is, in my opinion, with these external factors is really, really important. Talk about this quite a lot, and it's an area that I'm quite interested in around that. People talk a lot about, there's been quite a lot of research done, with this whole idea of talent needs trauma. And that is, again, talent needs trauma is a myth. That has, and even the researchers who coined the phrase talent needs trauma have said, we wish we'd never had, because it's one of those sort of memes that's grabbed and people now go, oh, talent needs trauma. It doesn't, but it can be a beneficial thing. Traumatic experiences can be a beneficial thing to those people who are developing their potential or their capability. But I think the important ingredient is the support. Yeah. And just before I jump off that, I agree with you. I think you're right. It's a flippant comment to talk about snowflakes. I think what I'm talking about is young people who don't benefit from the support of adults who notice and get asked the right questions. Don't necessarily have the framework they can use to reflect themselves to be able to make the right kinds of decisions. And then sometimes they're in this reactive death spiral almost. I think that's kind of what I think I was referring to.
I think also there is, so growing up, if I wanted to use the phone, I'd have to ask my mum. Now, there was no point in me asking him to use the phone because I had no one to phone. Okay? So it was like, well, why would, now we have, and we are where we are. Technology and the mobile phone thing, I think, has contributed a lot to the pressure that young people are now under. So they this year's cohort of A-level and GCSE students have sat more exams than any other cohort that's gone before them. They've moved away from a coursework supported approach to these massive linear exams. They're under pressure because of what media prescribes they should look like and feel like. There is no surprise. I think this week there's been 1 in 4 14-year-old girls will have self-harmed at some point. It's fun and fascinating around the poolside with cousins and whatever else, where I've got 6-year-olds saying, "Look at my six-pack." It's great because you're 6 and you don't have probably a couple of pints in the evening and a bottle of wine, and it's this body obsessed culture and this result. It's all about what I look, results, and we've moved away from what it feels like, and so there is spiraling mental health issues with the younger generation. I'm not convinced they weren't there with the older generation, but there wasn't maybe as much media pressure to conform, and life was harder. But everyone was grafting. Now there's more time for these things to manifest itself. My stepdaughter sat over on a sun lounger with her YouTube videos, watching or texting or whatever else. Well, that's their world now, and it's about building a resilience with them so that they can manage it. But if we had trouble at school, you went home and that was it. Now it's there 24/7.
Yeah,
and the pressure on young people is huge. So aside from the school-based exam stuff, the pressure if they're in a sporting environment where they want to be on an what would be termed an elite program or player development program or first team, whatever else. plus then what media dictates they should and shouldn't be doing, and it feels, Stuart, to me that there's a generation of kids that have lost values.
Yes.
So you hold the door, so one of the jobs you get to do as a teacher is the bus queue. Okay, so go and do the bus queue, and you've got a little old lady comes and gets to the front of the queue. So you say, afternoon, madam, would you like to come to the front of the queue? Kids turn around and say, that's not fair. What do you mean it's not fair? That's not fair. We were here first. I said, I think you're missing the point, because we respect somebody that's older than us. That's gone. Holding a door open for somebody has gone. And it's now become very me. The pressure around that is starting to implode, because there's not necessarily the support or the language or knowledge to undo where we are with all of that. Do you know what I mean? Whereas before, in our day, you respected somebody because they were older. Period. That was it. You held a door open for somebody because that was good manners. You said please and thank you, because if you didn't, you got cuffed around the head and told how embarrassing for me you didn't say thank you to so and so. And those values, those things have gone, and I think they're detrimental, because they were a framework for which young people would operate off and knew where they were. And now there's an entitlement and an arrogance around it, which isn't particularly pleasant, because we were here first. And I think it's a massive job then to try and put those values back. So I coached when my oldest was 4. There was nowhere for him to go and do football at the time, so I set up a little thing down the park with a mate where kids would come along and they'd pay a couple of quid to play football. And I used to have 2 pitches and do 5-a-side with the target goals. Okay, and I'd have dads down there, and it was just footy in the park. And I would do a little bit of coaching, a lot of fun. Everyone had a ball all of the time, apart from when we played, and it was all fun based. And if somebody put in a moody tackle or whatever, it was stop the game. Right, can you go and pick him up? Shake his hand. What do you need to do? And say sorry. Great. Didn't have any of the nonsense of the touchline dad. It was fun, it was safe, it was enjoyable, and I used to be overrun with numbers. I could have done 6 pitches, 8 pitches, because we built it. We did it on values. I'd get when the skills. At that age, everyone flocks around the ball, and when they became difficult and constrained the game, I'd put in what I used to call it the Jan Mulby. So I'd get one of the dads to be the holding midfielder, and all he would do is stand there and put the ball into space. Okay, so the children then get an idea of where space is. And I think coaching football is very different to rugby, or and probably more like hockey, where rugby, everything's in front of you, isn't it? With football, hockey, you're up and down, and everything's in all those spheres. But just built it on fun and manners. And the parents would say, it's amazing. She said, why have you done that? I said, because they don't, where else are they going to get that input? Be kind, play, have fun, say please and thank you. We'd have handshakes and thank yous at the end. Thank the dads. We'd have dad of the, all sorts of just fun and nonsense. But it was a really great environment. And I think that there's a layer of young people that have not had any kind of value input outside of school, or maybe formal coaching situations, just because parents maybe aren't there because they're working or whatever else, and they're then increasingly under pressure because of all of the social media stuff, the prescription to ascribe to look a certain way, to get these amazing GCSE A level results, to go on and do amazing things. And actually the fun of childhood's gone. The best thing that's happened over the last few months, my cousin fell out of the tree and cracked his head open. It's absolutely brilliant. I was like, that's fantastic, Dexter. That's brilliant. Pain is temporary, chicks dig scars. Absolutely brilliant. He's climbing a tree. Then where that doesn't happen anymore, does it?
It's interesting, isn't it, that I think the challenges with young people and the way the increasing sort of, like you say, the narcissism and the me, and I'm the only most important thing. It's a direct reflection of cultural, a cultural aspect. They are mirroring the culture, because everything around them is telling them that their value is contingent, or their self-worth is contingent on outcome.
Yeah.
So, in a lot of schooling environments, and you talked about fee-paying schools, but one of the things that I spend quite a bit of time in that environment, and a lot of the time, I speak to the staff and all those sorts of things. And one of the challenges that they often say is that these are young people who basically have an acute awareness of the fact that their self-worth is related to what they can produce for the school in order to bring about results. And likewise, in an education context, it's about, we want you to do well. Why? Because we want the results. Not necessarily because we want you to do well and we're going to give you the tools and everything else to help you navigate the world, help you navigate through life, help you to try and achieve whatever it is that you can achieve. So you talk about these values frameworks. I think this is really essential. So I rail against this all the time. So I've got, in my coaching, I've got parents asking me about, did we send the results into the league table, for under 11s cricket? No, we didn't. We don't care about that stuff. What do we care about? Well, we care about, what values we've established for ourselves that the players said that were important. They wanted to be good teammates, so teamwork. They want to show sportsmanship. They want to work hard, and they want to achieve stuff and all that sort of stuff. But it isn't just about the outcome, and it isn't just about the result. And if I send out messages that it is about that, and I start saying, "Oh yes, we won by this amount, or we lost by this amount, or we achieved this, and this was the best batsman who got the most runs," and all these sorts of things, I send out a completely different message, and it's subliminal. And people, I don't think, are aware of it. And so when people talk about how important winning is and everything else, what they don't realize is they're sending out a message to young people that you're valuable to us as long as you can help us to achieve this outcome. And then you're sending out a subliminal message to others to say, if you're not capable of doing that, you don't have value to us.
Yeah.
And then you can see how those values are mirrored in kids, because then they begin to realize, well, it's just about me, isn't it? It's got to be about what I do and how I do things. And so society has started to sort of create this culture, that we value certain things over and above others. And even going back to the point about parenting frameworks, so like you say, getting a clip around your ear and this, that, and the other, and this is what we used to get and all that sort of stuff. And we don't get that now. Some of that is because you've got adults who don't notice. Yeah. Also, it's because, to a certain extent, I feel as if the world has sort of moved into a space whereby, I think it's contingent upon us. I mean, I had, parenting approach where like a lot of us did, where, basically my mum mainly, would, either give me the look like you talk about, or, you'd get the clip round the ear or this, that, and the other. But I don't know if that's necessarily what fostered my way of being in the world. There's definitely some aspects of that. But I've definitely taken an approach with my kids that I'm not just going to tell them what to do, but I am going to ask them a lot of questions about what they think the right course of action might be, and what the consequences of different courses of action are. And I'm constantly, and this is a Mark Bennett thing as well, I constantly just lay options in front of my kids all the time and say, you got choice here. When my 7-year-old, she's saying, no, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. Okay, there's a choice, right? You got a choice to do this, right? And then the outcome, and just so you're aware of it, the consequences of this, or you've got a choice to do this and the consequences of this. Just make a choice. And it quite often takes her a while to come to the resolution of that choice, because she realizes one's pretty clearly the best one to do. Yeah. But she makes a choice. And my job is to follow through on the consequences. So she begins to realize that you can't do certain things and expect to just walk away from it scot-free. That's another aspect of this, by the way. Yeah. I think it's incumbent upon us to follow through on our obligations in consequence. Again, I think we often are letting kids off because we feel it's the right thing to do. Yeah. It's the good thing to do. That's not correct, in my opinion. In my opinion, they need to understand that there are moments in time where a choice of action will result in certain consequences. And if one is, oh, don't worry, we'll let you off, and then the other one is, you do have to follow through, otherwise you don't get the opportunities for learning.
Well, that's it's like the golden rule of teaching, I think, and coaching, working with young people, full stop, is if you say it, you've got to see it through. So the whole, so if you think back to school detentions, if I set a detention for you at lunchtime, I've got to be prepared to teach a 5-lesson day without lunch. Yeah. So what often will happen is I'll set a detention, well, what often happens, if I said it, I did it, because it was like, I'm working at the first school at the sports college, worked with 15 other PE teachers that were all on the same page. So you couldn't ask me for a ball at lunchtime and I say no, and then go and ask someone else and they would say yes. So there was PE was what shaped the school and moved the school forward very quickly because of those values and that consistency. So if I'm going to set a lunchtime detention, I've got to be prepared to lose my lunchtime. If I say we're not going to go out because your behaviour in this situation hasn't been good enough, I've got to be prepared to then do the walk of shame or do the phone call to say, look, we can't actually come because we've had a situation. Yeah. And that grey area, so children exploit the grey area. So I like things to be black and white and binary, in that if you do the right thing, that's great. If you do the wrong thing, then there's a consequence for that. And the child needs to understand, or the young person needs to understand the consequence. If you start with the grey area in between, where it's okay, I'm not going to pick the group up on you two talking while we're having a review or some kind of input or questioning, then the moment I let that go, I condone it. And so it then becomes more of a challenge, because other children or young people then go, well, look, he's not picking that up, so we'll do that. And it's really hard. And I think that framework is so important, because it gives them the security of what's acceptable or not, how they're going to work. And then once those, I say, ground rules, those expectations are clear, but they can move forward within that.
Yeah, but people don't. One of the things for me is people don't spend enough time establishing what the expectations are.
Yeah. And also they want to be liked.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so if you come to my coaching session and I'm really fierce on values, and you don't like me, okay, that's down to you. But you will leave here knowing that when I'm talking, you'll listen, or when I'm asking for your input, then you'll conduct yourself in a certain way. Later on in life, you'll look back and think, actually, do you know what? Those are really valuable learning opportunities. And I think we get caught up with the popularity contest and hearing, some of the other guests talking where they're play-based approach, and they're like, well, you're not doing anything. Well, why would I be? I'm asking questions and I'm setting the values of what's going on within this session. Surely that's the most important thing. Yeah, but they're not doing any drills. Well, they don't need to be doing drills because they've got time on the ball and they're learning.
Yeah. It's on. It's interesting on this whole area of. I think if people were to watch it depends on who I'm working with. To be honest, if it's young children, then the emphasis probably is placed. I mean, there's still a behavioural expectation established from the start, and it's based on values. So always we can refer back to, are you being a good teammate now? Or is this good? Are you showing good sportsmanship now? Is this how you're going to demonstrate discipline or working hard? So those always useful things of reference points, and they're very important to establish with any organisation. But the emphasis, if you're someone with a group of young children, what you'd see is a lot of energy. An environment that's kind of very positive, a lot of kind of reinforcement around effort and trying and striving and all those sorts of things. And if you see him working with a talent group and you just came along and observe, what it would look like is, well, so firstly, you wouldn't see me saying a great deal, but you would think that I was a bit tough.
Yeah. Because
you probably hadn't seen what you haven't seen is this group have established for themselves the desire for something to be, challenging, difficult, and to strive and to push them, right? Once they've made that agreement, my job then is to not allow them to fall back from that.
Yes.
So not allow them to drop into unacceptable behaviour that is not akin to the goals they've established for themselves. And my view always within this thing is that I think a lot of people fall foul of that. So if they have done that in the first place, right, which most people haven't, but if they have, then they will actually then go, oh, well, okay, in this instance, it doesn't matter. Now, the minute you do that, the minute you don't follow through on consequence, you've lost, in my opinion, because it shows that you are not prepared to be consistent to the values that you've established, in which case you shouldn't have bothered in the first place. Yeah. And then it all begins to unravel and crumble, and your culture disappears.
Well, you get that grey area, and children. So with and this is where Mark's work just sort of hit a spot and gave me a language that I probably was missing, was you set an expectation rather than a rule. Okay, so if I worked with a group of young people, regardless of age, and I said there are 10 rules, these are the golden rules, they would find 11 and 12 and exploit it.
Yeah.
An expectation is fluid. You know, so you can't meet my expectation because it's fluid, but you will meet it based on these values and these behaviours. And the moment you know, and something you've said, which I meant to come back to you with, around like the whole values and what does it feel like? Are you a good teammate? You know, like with reporting on your cricket scores and things, is in school and certainly in education, we would then try and justify that and then try and capture it in numbers. Oh, well, out of Stuart's class, their value rating is 9 out of 10. When they started, they were only a 4. He's had that much impact. And once you try and then constrain it, you lose feel. And the moment you've lost feel, you then have lost notice, and then you're not impacting in the way that you were.
Yeah.
And things aren't measurable, are they? I read James Kerr's All Black book, Legacy, and that made so much sense based on feel.
Yeah.
Yes, they get outcomes. They will undisputedly get outcomes, but the feeling of being part of that group of coaches, players, support, technical, all of that is off the scale.
Yeah.
Isn't it? And that's what changes and creates that culture. And I think when you're in a performance environment, whether it be in elite sport or education or whatever else, somebody is asking you for metrics that are quantifiable in number, but actually they're not always, are they? Or the right things aren't quantifiable in number, because you start then doing your feeling scores and your pride scores or your teammate scores and everything else. You just deaggregate all of those learning blocks and those values.
I think it was Einstein, wasn't it, who said, although Einstein's had an awful lot of quotes attributed to him that he didn't actually say, but I think he said something along the lines of, not everything that matters can be measured, and then not everything that can be measured matters.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes I think you're right. I think the measurement culture is another thing. So measurement in the form of results, outcomes, exam results, whether it's or team scores, but measurement also in the perspective of when you start to get people to take something that is, qualitative in nature and then all of a sudden create metrics around it. I think that becomes very, very dangerous. Interestingly, I've been doing some work with, or trying to do some work with, Al Smith and Mark Upton and John O'Byrne, who head up My Fastest Mile. It's a really interesting not-for-profit, and they've developed a means through partnership with Bangor University, Dave Snowden's Cynefin Centre for Applied Complexity. But they've developed a tool called SenseMaker, which uses a bit of machine learning, and what it does is it aggregates stories. And it basically pulls out themes from stories. So instead of asking somebody, can you make a rating? And then all of a sudden something becomes really super number based. Actually, what you're looking for is, are we seeing a trajectory of stories that like sound more like the kinds of stories that we want to hear than the kinds of stories that we don't want to hear? And if we see more of the stories we want to hear, then we know we're somewhere in the right direction.
Yeah.
And that's a very different way, I think, of measuring or tackling that kind of challenge that we sometimes have, which is, and we do live in this world, and as much as we want to rail against it, the reality is sometimes I think we have to try and find a means to justify methodology or justify our stuff, and therefore having a means by which to be able to say, well, actually, this isn't just mumbo jumbo. Look at the effect it's having based on what people are reporting qualitatively about their lived experience. And that's quite an exciting prospect, I think.
Yeah, the qualitative value of things, I think, is immense, because it goes back to feel and what was the experience of that person at that moment in that encounter situation. or what's the lasting legacy of that of those episodes on that person's outcome, their life, them as a whole. I think it just well, I think as coaches and educators, we lose sight of that because we're worried about getting through frameworks or measuring against frameworks, or have I got a waiting list? You know, I suppose what always stood out for me with teaching and coaching was did I have everyone taking part?
Yeah.
And if I've got 30 kids an hour or 40 kids an hour running around with happy smiley faces, then I've done my job in some regards. The technical side of it, and you know the conversation you had with Magic Academy boys around the courses being you go on a course and they're a proficiency, you get your badge and off you go, and then everyone's doing week one of how to set up a mall or whatever by the book, and have you got your triangles for your base and all the rest of it, or whether it be Chin-Lee-To teaching shot put or whatever it is, you lose actually the essence of coaching, which is building a relationship with a young person or a coachee that's going to bring about a predetermined change.
Yes.
And it's something, why do we have to measure it all? It's interesting. My new project. I'm now out of school working with a group called Ocean Over, who are based down in Stratford. And we're trying to challenge how young people view the city, because London's young people don't. I say London's young people, generalising. The families and the communities I've served do not look across at London and see it as opportunity. So the young people are constrained by postcode where they live. They don't travel. I had a fascinating conversation with a sixth former that really sort of lit this up for me. A couple of years ago at a careers event we had in school, and I said to him, where do you know London? He said Brentford. I was like, oh wow. And we were in Lambeth. I said, oh wow, what do you do in Brentford? Do you go and watch football? No, I go to Clapham Junction, I get a train out to Brentford, and I work in Asda. I was like, well, that's cracking, good for you. I said, have you ever been to the South Bank? He said, where's that? And it's about 2 miles from where school was. I said, well, if you walk that way, you hit the river. I said, just take your girlfriend, go for a walk along there, it's amazing. Wouldn't do it. And so the kids don't, they're constrained by where they are, and don't necessarily get the day trips and other things that they would have. So the new piece of work is about trying to unlock the city using apprenticeships for them. And we've talked about, so it's going to be called Skyline Apprenticeships. We've talked about how we can unlock those opportunities, but very much build it on values, and build their apprenticeship experience on a value base. So I'm working with Mark on it, and the interview questions and the questions we're asking the young people are value based. So there's a reason, it's not a maybe a standard. Why do you want to be an apprentice? Or tell us about yourself. I'm trying to understand what they're, try and get them to capture the narrative, the qualitative value base of where they are. Because that then becomes immediately more endearing or more meaningful to a potential employer that can see, oh, right, look, we really get a sense of their values. That's what drives them. That's what's in their core. Does that make sense?
100%. And it's one of those things that I feel it goes back to what you were saying earlier on. This word "feel."
Yeah.
We feel it seems to me that. We have, in an effort to try and quantify and measure everything, sort of, objectively and empirically, we've lost sight of, the kind of the human sense of it feels right. I mean, the amount of times I've been into a cultural environment where, everything on the tin, looks great, and all the numbers stack up, everything else, it doesn't feel right. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I think as humans, in our evolution, we've lost sense of some of those, lost touch of some of those senses, because we override them because we're high order thinkers. Yeah. And actually what we've lost is to be in tune with our environment and what's going on, because we've got so much, if you don't know something now, you go to Google, don't you? If the days of having to find something out in a library, someone tweeted yesterday about what this great new invention where you can listen to books, you can watch movies. It's like Netflix, but you don't have to pay for it. It's called the library. So the whole way we access information's changed, and we're desensitized to our environment, and that feeling of it is gone. So if you can light that up, so the work that I'll be doing is trying to reconnect young people to the city via apprenticeships. But if you can build that on a values and a feelings base, so I'll still be very much a teacher working with young people, asking difficult questions, getting them to think, to change their behaviour, taking them hand by hand through. I had a cracking example of a lad had an interview at Richmond College, and he said, "Do you know where it is, sir?" I said, "Yeah, I do, yeah. It's down the road from where I went to university." I said, "You need to get to the Clapham Junction, get a train out, come out the station at Twickenham, turn right towards rugby ground, first left, follow it down, you get there." He was going to do a building course. I said, "Are you going to go home and get changed?" He said, "No, I'm ready." And he was wearing a grey marv tracksuit that was the backside hanging out, had a baseball cap on, and a string vest. I was like, "Do you not think that you need to change because you want to create a good impression?" He said, "No, it's only building," and off he went. So those conventions and rules aren't there for a lot of young people. Well, you need to put those in place. You need to make them feel what it's like to get dressed up in your number ones. Go and do something that's, different, nervous. I'll guide you through that, but all the time I'm going to ask questions on the way.
Yeah.
And there'll be choices. Why is that an important choice? Why does it matter what you look like when someone meets you for the first time?
Yeah, I'm very passionate about apprenticeships. And this is from a day job perspective. And I actually had an apprentice in my first ever job in sport. It was my first ever job actually at all. And we actually took on an apprentice. So it was a little bit like the blind leading the blind. Yeah. But that young man has gone on to work for the International Cricket Council.
Yeah.
And leads and manages some of their biggest events. And, I'm not going to say it's anything to do with me, but what I am going to say is that I think he learned a whole stream of really valuable things about work, the expectations of work, all these sorts of things, which helped him then on his career path. And he could have gone away to university and done something similar. But I think his progression has been shaped by that kind of entry into the work environment and understanding what's required. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about apprenticeships. But the other reason I'm so passionate about apprenticeships is it's experiential learning at its best. Yeah. Yeah. And I know a lot of people criticize them and go, "Oh, it's minimum wage." Actually, it's the best. It's on the job learning from mentors, guides, supports, people who've been there and done it. And in my opinion, me learning as a coach, I did a qualification. It taught me some stuff. But what I really learned was working on the job with others, guiding me, helping me. And that's only happened later in my career. And I spent 20 years just making loads of mistakes, or 15 years making loads of mistakes and not being able to know what to do. So having someone there to guide you, and that's fundamentally built into the model of an apprenticeship. I see coaching, people talk about art and science. I see coaching as a craft.
Yeah.
And the reason it's a craft is it does blend the two. It's a creative endeavor. But every great craftsman or craftsperson, I suppose, has had some sort of mentor helping and guiding them on the job, becoming good at their craft. So I think apprenticeships in all walks of life are really valuable in that. And I would always, I think, go for an apprentice over somebody who has a qualification, or a qualification without any experience attached to it. I'll qualify that statement, because I think an apprentice is going to have far more world-based experience. They're going to be more employable, in my opinion, or more job-ready. But in coaching in particular, the apprenticeship model is the model that we should all espouse to. So yeah. We've assumed that people with a level 3 qualification are good coaches. Well, not if they just qualified yesterday. It's like being a driver that's just passed your driving test. You're never more risky when you just passed your driving test. Yeah. I can attest to that myself, to my cost.
That notice thing. So that experience that apprentice will have had, a young person or coach, mentor, whatever, will have had, is based on on that relationship that's built and the values that underpin you that are shared. And it's then, it becomes then a legacy that you, like you say, you pass down. The old stonemason passes down to the next apprentice, and the craft lives. But it's built on noticing and valuing, and as a model. I mean, I think there's no better way to learn on the job, and I know there's some bad press around it and all the rest of it. It's still a fantastic route for young people without, and I've sort of been quite vocal on Twitter around the whole fees thing and university. I've got to be honest, I'm absolutely crapping myself because I've got 3 sons and a stepdaughter that if they all want to go to university, I don't think I've got enough organs to ship on the black market to get them through.
The great news for you, of course, is the way the apprenticeship model is rolling out is people will be able to do degree apprenticeships on the job. Yeah. The great thing about what they've done with apprenticeships, in my opinion, is a lot of apprenticeships in the past were basically just dressed up qualifications. You didn't really get that much on the job learning. Now you actually have to be employed to get on an apprenticeship. Yeah. So you're into work straight away, which is ideal.
But it's building. It's experiential learning. It's feeling. Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to, I think this comes back to where we started, running through walls. It's just because a young person's got to start on a job doesn't mean they're going to get there. And actually, sometimes there needs, 100% asking right questions is model behaviours. Sometimes there needs to be a bit of a prod because I serve you, and I would be serving you, doing you an injustice if I didn't kick your backside and say, right, you need to sort yourself out because this isn't good enough.
Goes back to the point we made earlier about keeping people accountable to expectations that they've established for themselves with you in agreement.
Yeah. But it comes back to being I think working with young people, whether you're coaching, whatever sphere, teaching, the apprenticeship work I'm going to be doing, comes down to building those relationships built on trust, expectation, agreeing what the behaviours are going to be, the acceptable, unacceptable, and then holding each other to account for those. But it comes back to what I suppose what drove us at the start was thinking back to Jason with his cigarette burns over his body. Is noticing, yeah. And actually, young people have been able to say, "Do you know what? I'm having a hard time."
Yeah.
And then having that support network around them, whether it be from their coaching, their cricket coach, their teacher, another adult that just says, "Yeah, know what? I see that and I hear you. I'm here." And then you can start making transformational things happen.
Now, I'm very conscious that by talking to you whilst you're on holiday, that I'm doing the very same thing of stopping you from noticing your children. And you probably now need to go and pull them off a sun lounger from looking at YouTube underneath their towels, if they're anything like my kids, and we need to throw them into a pool, and then we actually need to start playing. So, and also I've also got to I've got some bits and pieces I need to get on with today as well, because as much as I'd love to carry on the conversation, the day job gets in the way. Not that I record if my boss is listening, not that I record these in the day at all. Listen, Nick, I've loved the conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I think there's a lot more we could have talked about, but I know that it's probably prompted people. They might want to get in touch with you and find out more about how Relentless Optimism can support maybe the stuff that they're trying to do, and how they can help support young people better. How do they get in touch if they want to know more?
So we taught ourselves how to build a website, which was
join the club.
That was experiential learning and a lot of swear words, and I don't understand why it keeps moving across. That's not supposed to be there.
That's where YouTube comes in. It comes in handy, though, doesn't it?
100%. So you can find us at www.relentless-optimism.com. We're on Twitter on @ouroptimism, and if you want to find out more about the apprenticeship stuff, the website's due to go up. skylineapprenticeships.co.uk. So more than happy to help share whatever. There's an email link on the website as well. That's ouroptimism@gmail.com if anyone wants it. But Yeah, just a big fan of the podcast, and delighted to be able to share my experiences. And if they're of use for anyone else, then great.
Well, you're someone who's been at the coalface of working with kids with a range of different backgrounds and a range of different needs, aspirations, and all those sorts of things. And your lived experiences, I think, are of huge value. I know a lot of people get an awful lot out of the conversation. I certainly did. And it's made me reflect actually quite a bit on going back to this point of the kids I serve and whether I'm serving the kids as well as I could be. And there's definitely some things that I've taken away from the conversation around that feel element, particularly, that I think are going to be really valuable, helping me working with the children that I'm supporting. So I know that, well, if anything, just selfishly, because obviously we're very narcissistic, selfishly, I've got a lot out of it. So that's great.
Well, no, that's a pleasure, and thanks for having me on.
No problem. And like always, as the new projects start to come on, it may well be that we can revisit this conversation further down the line, and then you can maybe sort of share with you some of the experiences that you have in working on the apprenticeships, but also some of the other things that you're doing within the coaching space as well.
Yeah, lovely. Would love to.
Great stuff. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, well, listen, have a good day, and I will go and retire to the Sun Lounger.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Talent Equation podcast. If you like the show, then please consider supporting it by leaving a review on your favorite podcast player, telling your friends about it, or even becoming a hero and show your appreciation by becoming a patron. Just head over to thetalentequation.co.uk and click on the Becoming a Patron button at the top of the page.